"You're not coming to the wedding," my mom coldly wrote in our family group chat. "Marta's future in-laws don't want you there. They think you wouldn't fit in with their crowd." I stared at my phone, fingers frozen above the keyboard, heart suddenly pounding like it might break through my ribcage. 5 years of helping pay for my sister's education. 3 years of covering her rent when she found herself in New York. 8 months of quietly handling deposits for her dream wedding venue, flowers and catering, all while being told I was just helping out a little. And now this. I smiled bitterly at my screen and typed a simple response. "What about blood?" Then I opened my laptop, logged into my accounts, and canceled everything I'd paid for, including the $15,000 non-refundable venue deposit. They had no idea what was coming next. Updated. Thanks for all the support flooding my inbox. I never expected this to blow up overnight. Some of you are asking if I regretted canceling the venue deposit. Honestly, that was just the beginning. Stay tuned for what happened when my phone started blowing up with panicked calls from my family. Have you ever been excluded from something you were secretly funding? I should have seen this coming. The signs were there, blinking like neon warnings I kept driving past. It started when we were kids. Marta was the golden child with her perfect grades and pageant smiles, while I was the reliable one who never caused trouble. When we grew up, the pattern just evolved. Marta went to an expensive private college that I helped pay for when our parents' funds ran short. I worked my way through state school and built a profitable online business selling custom art that my family still refers to as my little hobby. When Marta met Elliot Chamberlain 2 years ago, it was like winning the lottery for my status-obsessed family. The Chamberlains owned half the real estate in our county and had the kind of old money that makes people whisper when they enter rooms. Our family wasn't poor by any means. Solidly middle class with a nice house in a good neighborhood, but nowhere near their league. Suddenly, everything was about impressing the Chamberlains, making sure they didn't realize we weren't their kind of people. I knew I didn't fit their mold. I have bright purple hair, visible tattoos, and work from a studio apartment that's more paint than furniture. But I loved my sister, and when she tearfully confessed they couldn't afford the fairy tale wedding she'd always dreamed of, I stepped in. "I'm doing really well with the business," I told her. "Let me help." What I didn't say was that I'd be dipping into my savings, the money I'd been setting aside for my own future. That I'd be working double hours to make it happen. That I'd have to postpone my plans to expand my business just so she could have centerpieces made of imported flowers. None of them knew that I was the one who called in favors to book the historic Hamilton House estate when they were fully booked, a venue that typically took reservations 2 years in advance. Nobody knew I was the one who paid extra to hold both ceremony and reception dates when Marta couldn't decide which weekend would be more aesthetic. I just quietly handled it all because that's what I'd always done. Be the responsible one. The dependable one. The one who shows up. 3 days ago, Marta called me panicking because the caterer needed the second half of their payment. "Can you just take care of it?" she asked. "Mom and Dad are stretched thin with the rehearsal dinner, and Elliot's parents are already paying for the honeymoon." I transferred $7,800 that night, money that should have gone toward the new digital equipment I needed. When I asked Marta if I could at least bring a +1 to the wedding, the first guy I'd clicked with in years, she hesitated. "I'll check with Elliot's mom," she said. "The guest list is really tight." I should have known then what was coming. The day after my mom's text, I discovered why I was suddenly persona non grata at the wedding I was secretly funding. I met my cousin Ava for coffee, and she couldn't look me in the eye. "What's going on?" I asked, watching her fidget with her napkin. "Why don't the Chamberlains want me there?" "They saw your Instagram," she finally admitted. "The post about the Women's March, and your business page with all the colorful art. Mrs. Chamberlain told Marta you seemed politically extreme and bohemian. She said having someone like you there would make their conservative friends uncomfortable." My stomach clenched. "And what did Marta say?" Ava's eyes flicked away. She told them she understood completely. I sat there, coffee growing cold as Ava revealed more. Apparently, Marta had been telling the Chamberlains that she and our parents were paying for the entire wedding. She'd shown Mrs. Chamberlain the Hamilton house as if she'd discovered and booked it herself. She'd even laughed along when Mrs. Chamberlain made comments about creative types and how they couldn't possibly understand the real world. When I texted my mom later that day, her response was equally telling. "It's just one day, honey. Marta has a chance to marry into an important family. Sometimes we all need to make sacrifices for the greater good." Greater good. Like I hadn't been sacrificing for years. Updated. Your comments are giving me life. Several people asked what my sister said when I confronted her. Buckle up for that part. And yes, the Chamberlains had no idea who was actually paying for their precious society wedding of the year. The way everything unraveled at the engagement party still makes me smile. Have you ever had that moment where you finally stop being a doormat? That night, I sat on my paint splattered couch and felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly, it was clarity, sharp and clean like winter air. For years, I'd poured my time, money, and love into a family that saw me as the odd one out, the embarrassing one, the one to call when they needed money, but not when they were handing out wedding invitations. I opened my laptop and looked at my bank statements. Nearly $32,000 spent on Marta's wedding so far. Money that could have funded my business expansion, a down payment on a real studio, or even just a decent vacation after working nonstop for 3 years. And in return, I was the family secret, too embarrassing to be seen by the precious Chamberlains. No more, I whispered to my empty apartment. The decision crystallized, not in a burst of rage, but in a moment of absolute self-respect. I was done being the family ATM, done being hidden away like some shameful secret. I deserved better, and it was time they all learned that lesson. I didn't scream. I didn't write angry emails. I simply opened my accounting software and made a list of every penny I'd contributed to Marta's wedding, with dates, confirmation numbers, and receipts. Then I started making calls and sending emails, calm, professional, and final. First, I contacted the Hamilton House and canceled the venue reservation. Yes, I'd lose my deposit, but the remaining $20,000 payment wouldn't be happening. Next came the caterer, the florist, the photographer, the custom hand-lettered invitations that hadn't been mailed yet. One by one, I withdrew my financial support from the wedding I wasn't good enough to attend. With each cancellation, I felt lighter. I wasn't being vindictive. I was simply removing myself from an equation that didn't value me. By midnight, I had reclaimed what was left of my money and my dignity. Then I turned off my phone, made myself a cup of tea, and had the best sleep I'd had in months. The call started at 6:17 the next morning. First my mom, then Marta, then even my dad, who rarely involved himself in wedding nonsense. I let them all go to voicemail. At 8:45, my mom showed up at my apartment door, something she'd done exactly twice in the 3 years I'd lived there. "What have you done?" she demanded as soon as I opened the door, her face blotchy from crying. "The venue called Marta this morning saying everything's been canceled. The wedding is in 6 weeks." I stepped aside to let her in, my calm unnerving her more than anger would have. "I canceled my financial contributions to a wedding I'm not invited to," I said simply. "That seems reasonable, doesn't it?" But the deposit, all that money." "My money," I corrected her, "which I'm free to spend or not spend as I choose." She paced my small living room, stepping over art supplies and looking wildly out of place in her tennis club outfit. "You can't do this to your sister. The Chamberlains will think we're, what? Poor? Unreliable? Not good enough?" I sat on my couch watching her unravel. "Isn't that what they already think about me?" My phone buzzed again, Marta calling for the 7th time. I finally answered, putting it on speaker so our mother could hear. "What the actual hell?" Marta shrieked without preamble. "You canceled everything? The venue, the caterer, the flowers? Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've stopped paying for a wedding I'm not welcome at," I replied evenly. Pretty straightforward. "You can't, this isn't," she sputtered. "Mom, tell her she has to fix this." My mother looked between me and the phone, her certainty faltering. "Honey, surely we can work something out. Maybe the Chamberlains would reconsider." "I don't want them to reconsider," I cut in. "I don't want to be somewhere I'm not wanted. I'm just also not going to fund it." "But we can't afford this wedding without you," Marta wailed. "The Chamberlains are expecting—" "Ah," I said softly. "And there it is. They don't know, do they? They don't know you've been lying about who's paying for everything." The silence was deafening. 3 hours later, I was forwarded an email from Mrs. Chamberlain herself, suddenly insisting that I simply must attend the wedding, that any miscommunication was deeply regretted, that family was so important to them. I almost laughed at the transparently panicked backtracking. Instead of responding, I printed out my complete accounting of wedding expenses and brought it to the engagement party that weekend. The one Marta had previously told me was too small to include everyone. I hadn't been planning to go, but Marta had called me in tears, begging me to reconsider, saying the Chamberlains really wanted to meet her talented sister. The Chamberlain estate was exactly as pretentious as I'd imagined. Manicured grounds, staff in uniforms, the works. Marta and my parents looked like they might faint when I walked in with my purple hair and tattoos, but Elliot's mother bustled over immediately. "You must be the artist's sister," she exclaimed with manufactured warmth, eyes darting nervously to my visible tattoos. "We've heard so much about your creativity." "Have you?" I smiled pleasantly. I'm surprised since my creativity was too inappropriate for the wedding guest list until recently. The room seemed to go quiet. Mrs. Chamberlain's smile froze. There seems to be some confusion, I continued, my voice carrying in the sudden silence. About many things, including who's been paying for Marta and Elliot's wedding. Elliot appeared at his mother's side, frowning. What's she talking about, Marta? I thought your parents were handling your side of the expenses. Marta's face had gone chalk white. My mother stepped forward, trying to hustle me toward the door, but I stood my ground and opened the folder in my hands. I have here a complete accounting of the $32,487 I've personally contributed to this wedding, I said, handing copies to Elliot and his parents, including the now forfeited $15,000 deposit on Hamilton House, a venue that, until yesterday, was booked for your wedding. The look on Mrs. Chamberlain's face was priceless. Confusion, then shock, then the dawning realization that the bohemian sister they'd excluded was actually the one making their society wedding possible. This is irregular, Mr. Chamberlain sputtered, scanning the meticulous spreadsheet. Marta told us. I imagine Marta told you a lot of things, I said, none of which included the fact that her embarrassing purple-haired sister has been footing most of the bill. Marta began to cry, big gasping sobs that would have tugged at my heart a week earlier. Now, they just sounded manipulative. I didn't know what else to do, she wailed. They expected such a grand wedding, and Mom and Dad couldn't afford it, and you've always helped me. And I would have helped you with this too, I said quietly. If you had stood up for me, if you had told them the truth, if you had been a sister to me, rather than treating me like an ATM you're ashamed to be related to. The room had gone completely silent. Even the catering staff had stopped circulating with champagne flutes. Elliot was looking at Marta like he'd never seen her before, and his parents were having a heated, whispered conversation. Perhaps, Mrs. Chamberlain finally said, her voice tight, we should discuss the wedding plans, privately, as a family. Absolutely, I agreed, and just to be clear, that family no longer includes my checkbook. I turned to leave, but Elliot's father called after me. Wait, we can work something out. The Hamilton House? I looked back at the cluster of shocked faces. I'm afraid that ship has sailed. The venue's been rebooked for another wedding. They had a waiting list. As I walked out, I heard Mrs. Chamberlain say, How could you not tell us about this, Marta? Do you know how this makes us look? 2 months later, Marta and Elliot had a small wedding at his parents' country club. Elegant, but nothing like the extravaganza they'd planned. I didn't attend, not because I wasn't invited. I was repeatedly and desperately, but because I was in Barcelona, using some of my reclaimed wedding money to attend an international art exhibition where my work was being featured. My family's reaction to my boundary setting was predictable. First anger, then guilt-tripping, then reluctant acceptance when they realized I wasn't budging. The Chamberlains apparently had a similar progression with Marta, though with more emphasis on their embarrassment at having to downsize a wedding they'd been bragging about to their social circle. Elliot, surprisingly, reached out to me independently. I didn't know what Marta had done. He wrote, I'm sorry you were treated that way. For what it's worth, I thought your artwork was incredible when I looked it up after the party. I appreciated his message but kept my distance. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. My business has thrived in the months since I stopped bankrolling my family. I finally bought the digital equipment I needed, expanded my online presence, and even hired an assistant. My apartment still has paint on the floor and art supplies everywhere, but now it also has new gallery lighting and proper storage for my materials. My parents call occasionally, their tone carefully neutral. Marta texts on holidays. Neither has asked me for money since the engagement party, which feels like its own kind of victory. I don't hate them. I've just stopped sacrificing my needs for people who saw me as an embarrassment until they needed my bank account. Sometimes people ask if I regret losing my relationship with my family. I don't see it that way. I didn't lose anything authentic. I just stopped pretending our relationship was something it wasn't. The day I canceled that venue deposit wasn't the day I gave up on my family. It was the day I finally started valuing myself as much as I'd valued them. Here's what I've learned. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop letting others treat you like an option while treating them like a priority. Blood might be thicker than water, but self-respect is thicker than both. Updated. This post blew up way more than I expected. Thanks for all the awards and supportive messages. For those asking about Marta's current situation, she and Elliot are still together, but there's definite tension with his family. They're pregnant now, and guess who they haven't asked for financial help? That's right, Me. Has anyone else found that setting boundaries actually improved your relationship with difficult family members in the long run?